Okay, I'm back again. Back again, still not home. Still not home. Brain's going blank almost again. I've got a whole pile of screenshots of comments. We realized, Sarah reads a lot of comments sometimes. We realized there is a lot of people who don't write in their experiences, but they throw them down in the comments section. Then I was watching something the other day, some video. Somebody forwarded me a video and I looked at it and I caught a comment and I started going in the comments there. And it's amazing how many people hit the comments online and drop their sighting experiences, but they don't email them in anywhere. So there's a whole bunch of them here. I'm going to share them right now, all right? And get right into this, and then I'll go into the inbox and do our usual thing. But listen to this. Here's one. And they're usually just like handles, at RON something 418 for their handle on YouTube. But anyway, listen to this. Good morning, How to Hunt family. I have a friend who was on a 3-letter department training event in northern Maine. He was alerted to a noise in the night and came face to face with an 8-foot person. He was armed but said he couldn't move. He wasn't scared, but the Sabe wasn't scared, and the Sabe mind spoke to him that he was okay and departed. He had the typical lost it moment after. That's it. Wouldn't mind talking to that guy. I wonder if he's here watching. There's another one. Hopefully this fits better this way. Here we go. It's from a man named Kenneth. I saw one in 1969 on a creek in Tennessee, daylight. He walked up to me like a man and ran off on all fours, and I was 15 years old. I now know he was a short-faced bear. What? I now know he was a short-faced bear. 10 to 12 feet tall, 600 to 800 pounds, jet black, red around his eyes and mouth. You don't hunt them, they hunt you, but I don't think they will kill you. Want to be left alone. He used that sound on me and I peed myself. I now know he was a short-faced bear. That's a different comment, isn't it? Wouldn't mind hearing from you if you're here watching the channel. Right? Maybe if you want to email me or something and let me know exactly what you feel you saw and the details, if it's hands or feet or paws, if you said it was a bear. And email me at howtohunt or share my story at howtohunt.com. Here's another one. I used to do hotshot trucking. I was in Washington State, up by Snoqualmie Pass, way past the summit to the east. It was pitch black, no one else around, no houses, no nothing. I had to pull over and check my straps, and all of a sudden I heard a very loud roar, followed by what sounded like a dumpster being thrown into the air and crashing down. Wow. Followed by more screaming. It was so loud and powerful it shook my lungs. I quickly got into my truck and punched it out of there. I'm sure it was an enraged Sasquatch. I didn't want to stick around for it to throw rocks at me or whatever. It was a humbling experience. Oh, what's this one? Barely read it. I don't know what that's from, but that's not a comment in here. Okay, I'll check that out later. Hold on a minute. What else do we got? I got to scroll through some. Here's one. At ProGuide66. I hunt elk, moose, deer, and goats up in the northern BC. I've spent years in the bush and thousands of kilometers hiked. Last year, I had an experience in the woods while bugling elk, way down a gully in the dark timbers where I like to hunt them. I didn't see anything, but I had an overwhelming fear come over me suddenly, to the point I couldn't move. It lasted about a minute and then it passed. Then the other weird part of the story is the elk busted out like they had winded me, and it was impossible where I was set up. I had a steady thermal. Anyways, I thought you might want to find that I thought you might find that interesting. All right, I do find it interesting, Paul. Your name's Paul. I'd like to know whereabouts. I'm guessing around the Peace area, I would guess. If not the Peace, then I'm going to guess Prince George. I'm guessing, but there you go. There's somebody else who ran around BC, hunted for many, many, many years, right? Nothing. And all of a sudden, boom, in your face. Myth becomes reality, right? Here's another one. Oh, that was a nasty comment we posted and let him have it with the pinned comment of shame department. Oh, that makes me laugh when I do that. Now, who else? Hold on, I got a bunch in here. I just got stuff in between. What's this one? I'm going to tell you a story. Another comment from the comment section. Who knows the oldest account of Dogman? When they were first seen. Egypt says they had them back thousands of years ago as a god. I was in the PG War. What they never ever told us is why we were going. That war was in 1990 and 1991 that war was in 1990 and 1991. Around 2015 on YouTube, I found out, or was said, why the PG War. To steal two things from Iraq. A Stargate and a dead stiff from Egypt. The dead stiff was that exact Dogman god that ruled Egypt. What was said they did with it was they took it to DIA Underground, took its DNA, brought it back to life. Why, I asked, what were the oldest accounts of Dogman? I can't prove it, so it's just a story. That's an interesting story. Do I think that's possible? Hell yeah. Right now, anything's possible. Bunch of noises outside. It's too noisy outside to do it on the deck out here facing the water. It's just too noisy from that crashing of the waves. Here's another one. Snohomish County. I've had them in my yard, breaking trees. I got pictures, prints in my pasture, 3 missing hogs, and a missing alpaca. Yet his fur was left behind. 1 hog ripped in half and tossed in the mud. Long story. Yet I've been helped when my son was with me. About 15 years worth. Holy shit. And that's a subscriber on this channel, so if you would like to talk to me about this and share the pictures, I'm really interested in seeing the photos of the ripped in half hog. We had somebody from Australia had the same thing, came across the same thing. They showed us the blood trail in the dirt and the hog halves. And I'm familiar with hogs. It's not, you can't rip nothing in half. Email me at sharemystoryhowtohunt.com. Maybe just email me some of your stuff, or if you've got that much history, maybe we could set up a video meeting and do it that way, if you're into it. If not, that's okay. But sounds like you got some interesting information going on in your yard, right? I'm from central Massachusetts. These things are worldwide. I saw one in Connecticut while deer hunting in my early 20s. It was looking at me from behind a tree, peering around at me. It was just the break of dawn, and that has never, ever left my memory. I'm almost 40 now, and it took me 6 years to go back out there and hunt again. Thank you, Steve, for all you're doing for the people. No problem, Andrew, I got you. One after the other. One after the other, but don't teach our children about it publicly at all costs, right? Excuse me, here's another one. A doctor who lived in Bella Coola was a good friend of a local guide who had seen Sasquatch, including one night in front of his face popping out of the ocean with a fish in its mouth by the boat dock. When he was untying his boat to take an American client out fishing, the American client was close enough to see it and turned around and went straight back home to America, completely frightened. That doctor had the guide as a patient and friend and wrote a book about the guide and his experiences. I found that book in a public library several years ago, and I met a woman who lives in Bella Coola and had a hairdresser's and barbershop, and I think it was in Salmon Arm, BC. And she said the people around Bella Coola, etc., are familiar with Sasquatches, grizzly bears, etc. All right, that would have been Grizzlies and Guides, I think, by Clayton Mack, was the native guide. And our friend Jeff, remember our friend Jeff, who I went to his place, we sat down around the fire, and he also had that accident, got burned a couple years ago? He was in Bella Coola. He knew him and Clayton's friend, or family nephew, I think, and Jeff saw a Sasquatch there in Bella Coola too, with them. I wonder if that American fisherman's still online watching the channel. Here's another screenshot comment from the comment section. I've never had an experience, but I know that they must be real because of all the danged events that have happened. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. If you do any digging into our history, they have hidden and lied about everything. Tartaria is a place they have hidden and lied about. Our history, the wars, I mean, I could go on and on about stuff, but we need to wake up. Once you make a breakthrough about any of these things, it will open your mind. Trust me, I wanted my son to get into NASA and use his incredible brain, but then we both found out that NASA was a damned lie. The moon landing was a hoax, complete BS, and the firmament is real. I don't know the shape of this earth, but I know there are many ways to underground tunnels, passages to past Antarctica, etc. Ugh. Stay safe, people, and stay positive. We're all in this together. There you go. What I heard an American politician, one of the better ones, I think, the other day. He was grilling somebody in the Senate, and he said, he says, I think we're running out of conspiracy theories. We're gonna have to get some new ones because all the past 37 of them all become true, or something like that. He said we got to get more conspiracy theories because all the past ones are becoming true fact. How true is that? Good morning, How to Hunt family. It's this old woman again. I seen one in 1983 in North California. It happened so fast I didn't have time to be scared. I didn't see his face as he was running from my camp. It was very tall and seemed young, shiny dark hair, and it was incredibly fast. When I stepped out of my tent to investigate the noises in my camp, I expected to see a raccoon or a skunk. And all I had time to say was, oh my gosh, I think I just seen Bigfoot. I do have PTSD, but it wasn't from Bigfoot. It was men who caused it. I realize not all men are mean, and I thank God you all. I just wish I didn't have such a knack for finding only the ones who thought it was their property to be used and abused. I'm so happy for all you women who were smarter than me about who you chose for your life partner. God bless you all. All right, thanks for sending that in. Sorry about your bad experiences with some ugly people, but there is a lot of good people out there. Never give up, right? Never, ever give up. Now here we go, all right. Here we go, here's another one. I was camping about 5 miles off of a hiking trail in these woods back in 1972. It was just me and my dog staying in a tiny tent for a week to get away from it all. And one night, I was sitting next to my campfire and my dog started barking and then ran into the woods. I chased after Misty, and after about 30 minutes, I found her. And I started to walk back to my campsite, and my tent was smashed down, and my canned goods were stolen. I started to walk around the area with Misty, and I saw one of my cans of pork and beans lying on the ground in front of me. It had been squeezed so hard that the top was missing, and it was empty. A human could not have squeezed the can with that much strength. Then I found a can of SpaghettiOs of mine that was squeezed open as well. And then I heard a loud thump sound coming from the direction of my campsite. I walked back to my tent and noticed that a huge rock was laying on my tent. It was massive granite rock that was about 6 feet in diameter and 4 feet tall. Holy shit, there's a statement. Whoa. And I lost my spot. It was a massive granite rock that was about 6 feet in diameter and 4 feet tall. A human could not have lifted that rock. Also, a human would have used my can opener to open the food cans, since it was laying next to my food supply. I grabbed my dog and left that awful place, and I haven't slept in a tent since then, and I never returned to those woods. No doubt. I wish I was near you, and then I'd possibly talk you into taking me there so we could go check out what's left of your tent from underneath the edges of that rock and take some pictures and show everybody. That'd be something to see. It's making a statement though, right? I'm now 66 years old. When I was probably 16, my best friend and I went with his older sister and her boyfriend and a few others up into the woods in Oregon. Daryl, my best friend, and I were the youngest. I remember this other older guy that was there with us that I thought was one of the toughest guys I'd ever known. Anyway, we went up to this old gravel pit that was at the bottom of this bowl of mountains. We were in 2 different cars. We were there for a while, and then we heard this enormous yell/growling sound from towards the top of the mountain. Then whatever this thing was, it started running down the mountain toward our location. You could hear its yelling and huge branches being ripped through as it quickly came down. This thing was hauling, and it was dark. And I just remember looking at that tough guy's eyes, and I saw pure fear. We all jumped into our cars and got out of there. It was incredible and extremely scary. There's another one. Listen to this one. Here's another one. My late uncle had a campsite way up our river. He loved camping out there alone. He found it peaceful until one night he wasn't alone. There was something outside his cabin throwing rocks and pebbles trying to provoke him while he was sleeping. He got up and listened. He heard someone walking around his cabin as if they were searching his campsite. He just stayed quiet until it was gone. The next morning he searched for clues to what it could have been. He didn't find anything besides his things being moved around outside. He didn't bother his trip and stayed. It was nighttime and he was trying to go to bed, but that thing came back, but this time it kept banging on his cabin. That's when he finally got out with his gun and started yelling. He didn't see anything and went back to bed. And the next day he decided to leave food out to see what would happen. And nothing happened that night. But the food he left out was gone. He kept leaving food out every night, and every morning it would be gone. When he doesn't leave food out, it tries to make him leave by provoking him. I guess he was camping on his territory. Yeah. Bang, bang on the door, give me a snack or else. Here's another one. In 2013, I was walking through the woods in the Appalachian Mountains here in West Virginia. I was 13 years old and doing what I often did, I explore. It was a bright summer day, clear weather, and I was walking along the creek bed, heading back home. I remember thinking to myself how quiet the woods were at the time. Absolutely no sound of wildlife whatsoever, which I remember thinking to myself was odd. I continued walking, and shortly after I heard a bush shake, a shake that was notably not the wind, a violent shake like a person had purposely drawn my attention. I remember looking to the left of me where the noise was coming from, and at first didn't notice anything. I kept observing when I heard the bush shake once more, and at that point instantly noticed what I initially thought was a bear. We don't have any brown bears in West Virginia. It was crouched over, with its right hand extended onto the branch that had been shaken, looking directly at me. I'd say it was roughly 40 yards away from me at the time, pretty close to get a good look. It then stood straight up on 2 legs, pivoted toward the right and into a run, in the same motion. It ran in the opposite direction as I was traveling, and you could bet your ass I ran as fast as my little ass could the other way. I can still picture it in my head as an adult. It stood about 7 feet tall, arms extended down past its waist, long arms, and ran upright like a person with its elbows bent. It had long, brown, not very dark, almost an orangish/brown fur all over its body. And when it was running, it took long strides. I didn't feel threatened at the time, but it was something I couldn't wrap my mind around, and I had no interest in sticking around to investigate. I would have walked right past this thing. It purposely got my attention. I'm obviously a pretty bad storyteller, nor do I really expect anyone to believe a word of this, because if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I absolutely would call me a Fruit Loop, LOL. There you go. We believe you. We've all been there. Here's another one. My late uncle had a very similar encounter in a swamp near Clio, Michigan, back in the late 50s. There was a shaking shrub, then a huge, all blonde-haired creature stood up on two legs and came into view. It growled at him. He was not alone, but with two friends, and they took off real quick. He said it looked kind of like an old cartoon comic character called The Heap. He told that story every time we asked him to, and it was always the same, with no embellishments until the day he died. Only after the Patterson-Gimlin film came out in the late 60s did he say it was a Sasquatch. There you go, there's another one. And here's another one. I heard something in 2021 around 11 o'clock at night that I've never heard before, and I froze in my tracks standing on my porch. A couple of grunts and a 14-second screaming, roaring type of noise combined rattled my insides, and I didn't think that it was ever going to stop. I was frozen in fear, and I can't remember ever being that afraid my entire life. I'm probably at least 75 feet from the wood line, and it sounded like it was a couple of 100 feet from where I was standing. Whatever it was could see me, but I couldn't see anything, although I have a street light in my yard, but it has an orange bulb that makes it hard to see anything beyond the wood line. I have a flashlight now that'll light up the woods fairly good, and if I would have had it at that point in time, I may have seen it. I kept smelling a stench a couple of days before, and right when I heard whatever it was, because that stinking is what made me go outside to begin with. Whoops. About 5 or 10 minutes of being outside, that's when I heard a couple of grunts and then a noise that hold on a minute. About 5 or 10 minutes of being outside, that's when I heard a couple of grunts and then a noise that I had never heard before. I had to make myself get inside because, like I said, I was froze from whatever I just heard. I wanted to go the next day and look around, but I couldn't get up enough nerve to do it, so I just let it go at that. And exactly 5 days later, a sighting was captured 42 miles away from where I live. I can't say for sure they seen what I heard, but it seemed to link itself, because after looking at a map instead of Google Earth, it could have been the same thing I heard, but like I said, I can't be sure of it. I'm not ever sure what I heard, although I heard the exact thing on YouTube almost a year later. I never go outside at night unless someone else is here, because it's hard to tell what's roaming around in the Monongahela and Appalachian Mountains in the hills of West Virginia. Eyes always told as a child that the boogeyman in the roaming woods, and now, hold on a minute, sorry, it's screenshot, and then got to go to the next screenshot, find where it is. It's always told as a child that the boogeyman is roaming in the woods, and now I'm pretty sure of what they meant, because the old timers that continuously told me that, I'm pretty sure they had seen it all back before. I, as a child in the 60s and 70s, that volume of that man speaking of, that's what blew my mind, because I've heard something like that at a distance at night, but never that close before. It's a horrible feeling, especially when you're 62 years old and have never heard anything anywhere close to being anything quite like this before. There you go. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. All right, here we go into the inbox now. Back to the emails. God, I want to be at home. Well, I shouldn't say I really want to be at home, but I'm too antsy. I'm not a good relaxer. I want to do things. I got a bunch of stuff that I want to get done at home when it comes to this. All of you, other things I want to do, and I can't do shit while I'm here, it feels like. All right, hold on a minute. What's this, Mark? This is Brad. Babbling away. My little in-between outbursts probably don't make much sense. Anyway. It sounded like a woman being murdered. Every time, right? What a shit-eating sound. Why that one? And how, I mean, I've never heard a woman being murdered myself, but anyway. Hi Steve, I've camped, hunted, and fished my whole life. I'd never had an experience like this before or since my possible encounter. And this happened in the fall of 2008. During that time, I was living near the San Jacinto Mountains in Southern California. I decided to take my son camping for the weekend. He was 8 at the time, and he remembers this encounter very well, and he can corroborate my story. We camped at a primitive site that we had hiked near in the past. It's a pretty remote area for being in Southern California. The campsite is at least 5 miles back in the National Forest. A pretty rutted fire access road. I had camped there by myself on other occasions. I'd heard noises, but just chalked it up to wildlife. On one occasion, I thought I heard a scream. It was muffled and sounded far away. I know sound can carry in the woods, so I assumed it was people messing around. However, on the one weekend that I took my son, we were woken up in the middle of the night, 1 or 2 a.m., by something big in the woods near our campsite. Then, all of a sudden, there was a very loud, blood-curdling scream that sounded like a woman being murdered off to one side. Then another scream in the opposite direction. There was also something large crushing brush around the campsite. My son was scared and asked if it was a coyote, a raccoon, or even a mountain lion, and I said, whatever it is, it sounds bigger than that. And all the hair was up on the back of my neck, and I was scared too. I had not felt like that since my tour in Iraq in 2003. I told my son to plug his ears. He put on his gun muffs, and I dumped a mag of 45 ACP into the hillside outside the tent. And I yelled, "Get out of here." And then I told my son we're leaving. And I began tearing down the tent. We hastily threw all our camping gear and the tent in the back of the truck and left as soon as we could. We never camped at that spot again. At the time, I never even thought it could have been a Sasquatch. However, recently I've been watching a camera's falling. At the time, I never even thought it could have been a Sasquatch. However, recently I've been watching the Survive Man Sasquatch series, and it led me to your YouTube channel. I've also started digging a bit more on the subject and discovered that some researchers believe Sasquatch will make a blood-curdling scream. And here it is 12 years later, and I'm blown away by what I am just now learning about my possible encounter. I also Googled to see if people have had any encounters in the San Jacinto Mountains. And to my surprise, I discovered the local Soboba, S-O-B-O-B-A, Soboba and Quahila Indians have a legend of Tukwis, or Mountain Devil. Tukwit's Peak in Idlewild, I-D-Y-L-L-W-I-L-D. Idlewild is supposedly named after it. I hope you share this on your channel. I'm curious to see if anyone else has had an encounter in the San Jacinto Mountains or San Bernardino Mountains. Thank you for your time and thanks for your reading. Do you think this is a Sasquatch encounter? Please leave my name out. Thanks. Okay, man. Do I believe a Sasquatch encounter? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a Sasquatch encounter, 110%. I do think so myself. And I believe you know you did. At this stage of the game, too. Welcome to the club, man. It's a big one. Hi, Steve. I recently just found your channel. It's very interesting. My name is Glenn. I live in northern Alberta, but I'm from the Fraser Valley originally. Anyway, I thought I'd share this story with you. Something unexplainable that happened during a fishing trip my cousin and I were on as teenagers up the Skagit Valley. I'm originally from the town of Hope, and this is where this takes place. So, northern Alberta, Fraser Valley and Hope, you got all the hot spots covered. This would have been the early 70s, probably 71 or possibly 72. My grandfather used to take my 2 cousins and I hunting and fishing a lot in the mountains around Hope, BC. And once we hit our teens, my older cousin and I often headed out on our 10-speed bikes to go camping/fishing for an overnighter trip. And this particular time, we headed out to a lake called Green Drop Lake, which is up the Silver Skagit Road. I believe now there is a logging road going close by, but at the time there was only a trail called Hicks Creek Trail, I believe, that left just a few hundred meters off the main road that goes up to Ross Lake. Anyway, I'd never been to it before, but my cousin had been there with my grandfather and uncle and assured me that unlike the trail to nearby Eaton Lake, which was then called Crescent Lake, this trail was gentle and we could probably ride our bikes all the way to it. So we packed up our sleeping bags and some grub and headed out on a Saturday. I think it was late spring or early summer. It turned out my cousin had seriously underestimated how long it would take to ride our bikes there and how the logging road was a long, slightly uphill grade. We were just past Silver Lake when a fellow in a pickup asked us where we were going and offered to give us and our bikes a ride, which we gladly accepted. We got off where the trail started and started heading up the trail. And by then it was pissing rain and the bikes were all but useless in the mud, so we ditched them, hiding them in the bush beside someone's old shake claim. Shake claim, that's where people make cedar shakes for roofing. We continued on foot for a couple kilometers, and just as we were going through a heavily vegetated meadow, common in the valley bottoms in this area, we heard something big run off in front of us. We were scared shitless, as we had no gun with us, but decided to press on, as this was no place to make camp, so we kept going, making lots of noise. We assumed it must have been a bear, as there was a large flattened area in a grassy spot where we heard the noise originate from. Eventually we got to the semi-open area, and there was a log with the top slabbed flat with a power saw, set up as a footbridge over the creek. I remember it was 12 feet or so above the water. The trail went into some standing timber not long after the crossing, and it was getting late, so we decided to set up camp there and go to the lake the next day. It was still pissing rain, and we were having a hell of a time getting a fire going in the old growth, as there was not a lot of dry fuel around. We were practically right on the trail and never saw another soul or any sign of anyone, as few people knew about this place yet. Anyway, after about a half an hour trying to get a fire going, we were getting frustrated. Both of us got a creepy feeling we were being watched as well. I suggested we head back down to where our bikes were, as we'd have no problem getting a fire going with all the cedar from the shade claim. So we headed back down. And this is where it got weird. Set across the crude log bridge were two huge, heavy slabs of wood laying crossways across it on the flat surface. We looked at each other with a what the F look and kept going. Who or what put these huge, heavy slabs of wood in the middle of the crude footbridge that was 12 feet high in the air was and still is a mystery to me, but I do have a hunch. We were feeling extra creeped out by then, as we had not seen or heard a soul, so we continued post-haste back to where our bikes were, got a huge cedar fire going, and stayed up all night, burning the rest of the cedar blocks that had been left there. The next morning we jumped on our bikes and rode back home, opting not to go to the lake, saying to each other we needed to start bringing at least a 22 with us. So that's it, not terribly exciting, but an experience about something unexplainable just the same. I would have been about 14 and my cousin 16. My paternal grandmother was Thompson Salish from the Nalaka Pamux Nation, of which I am a member as well. My dad used to tell me how she knew the lady that watched a Sasquatch take one of her big barrels of salt fish and carry it up the mountain like it was a lunch pail. I believe the story is in one of the books about them, written about them in the 60s during the Patterson-Gimlin era. Yeah, what was the name of that one? Ruby Creek. The Ruby Creek incident. With indigenous folks, it's generally not even a question about whether these beings exist or not. They just do. Feel free to share this story. I will watch for it. Okay, I remember reading this a long time ago. It was marked as unread in this file. Oh well. Long time ago though, but if you're still here, thanks again. I'm surprised you guys didn't have any more experiences than that back then in those neighborhoods. But I'll bet you a lot of your neighbors did, and still do today. Okay, one more and I'm getting my butt going. I beg your pardon, Steve. I always tend to rush things, like emails, when I'm excited about them. It's a bad habit and drives my friends bonkers, but I'm working on it. So I've copied and pasted the original email I sent you earlier and added some more important info at the bottom. Thank you for your patience, sir. Good day to you, Steve. I pray that you and yours are well, and thank you so much for all that you do. You're a good man, and I genuinely appreciate you. Appreciate the kind words. I apologize in advance for this is going to be a long one. I'm using an alias for my brother, as he would be pretty upset to know I shared his story. But this is entirely too important to be left out of the ongoing saga of the Bigfoot, and also, who knows, this just might help someone somewhere. Beautiful. I've always been fascinated with Bigfoot ever since I was a kid of 7 or 8. I even went with my friend one night to see Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot, at a local theater, and that movie scared the heck out of both of us. I recently rewatched the movie and had a laugh because I could hardly believe I was ever scared by this chunk of cheese. My family also knew of my fascination, and I believe my dad was interested too, because every time there's a Bigfoot documentary on TV, he was right there watching it with my brother and I. My parents even gave me a copy of Peter Burns' Bigfoot book for my birthday one year, and I must have read it 100 times. The following incident happened about 10 or 11 years ago. I was chatting with my mother on the phone, and she asked how I enjoyed a recent camping trip I had taken with some friends. I made a joke about how we didn't see Bigfoot, but we had a great time regardless, to which she replied, "Well, your brother would be happy to learn that." And when I asked her what she meant, she seemed surprised that he'd never told me. And when I pressed her, she informed me that Larry had a very extraordinary Bigfoot encounter a few years back. I was rather PO'd that Larry hadn't told me about this when he knew of my lifelong interest. And right after I hung up with Mom, I called Larry and jokingly asked him, "What's the big idea? Being Harry Holdout with news of an encounter that he'd never told me about." He guessed correctly that Mom had told me. He said he'd tell me, but he wouldn't answer any questions. Thought that was strange, but went along. This occurred in '89 in the town of Grays Creek near Fayetteville, North Carolina. Larry's working as a delivery man for a local branch of a nationwide pizza chain. He was tasked to deliver some pizzas to a college frat house. Larry's car was in the shop at the time, so he was driving his boss's pickup truck. He successfully delivered the pizzas and was driving back through Grays Creek, North Carolina on a road with overhanging oak trees. He had the windows open and was listening to the radio when all of a sudden he heard a loud bang from the bed of the truck. He slammed on the brakes while looking in the rearview mirror and could see something black up against the rear window. When he got to a full stop, he saw something flailing around, and it managed to roll/push its way to the open tailgate and get out of the truck bed. Larry was still looking in the rear view, trying to figure out what this thing was, when he saw it stand up on 2 feet and rise to an estimated height of 7 feet. He grabbed and tilted the mirror so he could see his face, and right as he got it in focus, it looked right into the mirror back at him with an expression of pure murderous hate on its human-like face, his words. Next, it stood up straight, squared its shoulders, and let out a huge and super loud screeching roar. And Larry ain't no dummy. He turned right back around and stomped on the gas because he knew that this thing got its hands on him, it would absolutely tear him apart. Larry says he has no recollection of driving back to the pizza joint. Just that next thing he knew, he was getting out of the truck in the parking lot and his knees buckled, and he would have fallen down flat had he not managed to catch himself from the door's armrest. He said he stayed squatted and gulping for air for about 3 minutes, and then he went in trying to look like he was all right. Shit. Bracket. The rest of the story comes from my mom and dad in bracket. When Larry's boss saw him, he knew Larry was most definitely not all right because he was as pale as a sheet and his eyes were huge. Larry's manager turned him right back around and drove him home. Larry says he has no memory of saying anything to his boss during the drive. And when they arrived at the house, Mom walked Larry back to his room so he could lay down while my dad and Larry's boss looked at his truck. The part of the bed's insides, the part of the bed's sides near the rear window were crumpled downwards a good bit, and there was blood in the bed as well as some tufts of hair, and there was a really bad smell. Dad said it smelled like a skunk had sprayed down a burning tire while King Kong crapped on it. Mom and Dad wound up sitting up with Larry all night because he was obviously in a state of shock, and they came close to taking him to the hospital a couple of times, but Larry insisted he was okay. He related his story to both Mom and Dad a little while after, and they say they both believe him. And my parents have always been experts at spotting lies. Trust me on that one. And about a year later, Mom and Dad, my wife and I, and Larry and his family were vacationing together, and I was excited that I'd get to ask him about his experience face to face. I sat down with a notepad and a pen and had downloaded a voice recorder app on my phone. He looked at both and just said, "No way, bub. I don't want you submitting this to any Bigfoot organization, and furthermore, this is going to be the last time we talk about this, okay?" And I agreed, and asked some questions that helped fill in the blanks in the account I just shared with you. I have a bit more to tell you about my brother. When he was relating what happened to me during our vacation, I saw both fear in his eyes and goosebumps rose up on his arms more than once. And you can't fake that. What really hammered things home for me is the fact that my brother is former Special Forces and served a tour over in the sandbox. He just doesn't get scared. The addendum. After we discussed this for the second and last time, I expressed to Larry that even though his encounter was horrifying, I was still jealous of him and told him that I just want to see one for myself. And Steve, his next line absolutely made my blood run cold. He looked at me with an expression of pure dread, which, up until then, was an expression I'd never seen on his face before. He just looked me dead in the eyes and said, matter-of-factly, "No, you don't." And at that point, it finally sunk into me that this experience had left poor Larry with legitimate PTSD, and that gives me chills to this day. Once again, God bless you and yours, and good hunting, always a friend. That one sounded a bit familiar too, but whatever. Holy shit. So what happened there? What happened there? Sounds like he jumped down on that truck intentionally. And if he didn't, well, he did it by accident. Either way. How? What? You know what I mean? And then to look at the guy driving with absolute terror, or anger and hatred. That's not uncommon, that look. Holy shit. Wouldn't it be pretty wild to see the photographs of the outcome of that? Seeing the photographs or video of that box of the truck with the dents and the blood and the hair. You imagine, picture yourself having that experience. Picture it just being you. Now what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Now what are you going to do? Who are you going to tell that one the next day? I mean today, with everything we know and how many people have come forward now, I'd like to think that the majority of people now don't have a problem coming forward, but imagine previous, before we were all doing this today, having something like that happen. You guys are delivering pizzas and this big huge hairy thing jump in the box of the truck. Straight to jail for you, or the insane asylum, I guess the same thing, right? Anyway, there you go. More voices. More voices. Never admit it publicly for the human herd to know at all costs, no matter what. Deny, deny, deny. Don't speak of it at all costs. Why? It ain't because of money. It's not because of money. It's something a little bit bigger than that. Anyway, I'm going to get ripping. A new day. New day. What to do today? I guess I'll have to go talk to the big boss and find out what's going on today. But anyway, share my story at hunt.com. Get that truth out, you guys. Get it out. I'm looking forward to getting home. I got some people I want to talk to. I got all sorts of stuff I'm looking forward to doing. I'm feeling antsy, but the big boss is absolutely in her element. She don't want to go home. I'll be back later.